What is his confidence level now? You know, after this trade deadline, what is his confidence level? And not just these young guys that he's drafted, but his confidence level as well as Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey being those dudes.
Yes.
Being those guys, being those stars.
There are so many moving pieces to this, and not many people, including myself, can really keep track. All I care about now moving forward, I don't recognize some of the names, but do they fit together? Can they play together? Can they learn how to play winning basketball? Can they bring out the best in Cade and Jaden Ivey and Ausar Thompson and Jalen Duren? Kool-Aid, you know you're going to ask Troy Weaver what his confidence level is, but what would be your grade? How confident are you in these moves that they just made?
Yeah, in the moves that I just made, I give it a C. That's what I do. It's kind of a middle of a road grade. I believe that they kind of cleared up some log jams a little bit. They got some of these vets and some of these older kind of voices and players out of here who also, when you look at their games, I like what Alec Burks and Bojan can bring on the offensive side of the ball, but I do believe they were taking away from guys opportunities like Marcus Sasser, like Jaden Ivey, like Jalen Duren. But the defensive side is where I believe they got better at this trade deadline. They brought in some guys that play just better defense than the guys that left. 8 players out, 8 players in. That's kind of how this thing went. And like I said before, this trade to me is going to either move up or down based on what the rookies, what the young players, what the guys drafted here to be those guys do with this new opportunity.
And that's kind of what the main thing I took out of it. There was all these moving pieces, but this core is still intact. So whatever these moves were made, we still have Cade and Jaden and Ausar. Marcus Sasser, I should have mentioned Marcus Sasser. He's a huge part of this future, in my opinion. Are you? It may be too early to tell, but is there an identity to this team, or did these moves help create an identity, or does that have to come this offseason with the next moves?
No. If you have to wait until the offseason to try to create or start to make an identity for yourself, I think that's a little bit too late. The end of this season has to be about this team playing better. Has to be about finding kind of that chemistry and that rhythm. The identity of this team is going to rest in hard-nosed basketball, hustling, never giving up. Some of the things we've seen, because mind you guys this, over the last 12 games, does anybody want to take a stab at what the Detroit Pistons record actually is over the last 12 games?
Is it 5-7?
It's 5-7. It's 5-7.
Damn.
Think about it. And that's since they traded for Mike Muscala and Gallinari. And they got rid of 2 players who generally weren't necessarily helping them on the defensive side of the ball or at stretching the floor. Mm-hmm. This trade deadline brought in a bevy of those types of players who can stretch the floor at a 36% or higher rate from 3 and can play really pretty decent defense. So now when you look at the fact that this core is now surrounded by, like I said before, you start surrounding these guys like they did prior with Drummond and Stanley Johnson. That just wasn't enough of a young core to surround them with talent or lack thereof, like we just saw the Pistons do at this deadline. Now you're bringing in that similar type of kind of mid-talent, but it's around guys that you expect can carry the burden of the franchise. So I do believe that the identity of this team is always going to rest in that core, working together, finding that chemistry, playing for each other, being for each other, and playing, honestly, hard-nosed, tough defensive basketball that we've seen associated with Detroit Pistons anytime they've been a winner. So
Kool-Aid.
Talk to me, brother.
My dog. I just, I had time to sit on it and pause and just I don't know, man. Does this trade, just the deadline in general, does it not seem like some of these moves were a bit desperate? Now, you didn't get full value for Bogey because you waited too long to trade him. You couldn't trade Killian Hayes, so much so to the point that you had to cut him. You got a lot of young players in here, and when you see all these kind of moves coming in all at once, you kind of think like, okay, they're acquiring assets to make a bigger move. The bigger move never came. And then, you got contract flexibility heading into the offseason, but I just, in a weak free agent market, in a draft where you really don't need to add more young players to this team, I just don't necessarily see the direction or the identity that they're trying to go in, man. And it's some of these moves just absolutely seem desperate to me. What's your thoughts on that, on the whole trade deadline overall, man? Because I feel like they did not get maximum value for a lot of these picks, and a lot of these picks were lateral moves.
Yeah, in my opinion. And I see Mark Royal, he's kind of saying something too. Kool-Aid was just saying how much better the team would be once Bojan came back from injury. Now the Pistons are better that he's traded. What is it? Both can be true. Bojan did make the Pistons a better team. He's a plus player who can shoot from 3. but he also has some deficiencies.
Oh,
and he
yeah.
wasn't the same player this year that he was last year. And then you mix in injuries to Cade, mix in injuries to Jalen Duren, mix in injuries to Alec Burks, and it's just not, okay, Bojan's coming back to this healthy team. It was Bojan coming back to a team and carrying probably a burden that he shouldn't have been able to carry. To me personally, the identity of this team, I'm going to continue to say it, it rests in these young players, KG.
Yeah.
That's just it. If Cade and Ivy and Duren are those guys, if Duren can be that 2020 threat every single night that we see, if Cade Cunningham can continue to be the connector that he was drafted to be, if Jaden Ivey can be a scorer that continues to put pressure on the opposing team's defense, and if honestly Isaiah Stewart, as long as he's here, if he can continue to be kind of that Mr. Tough guy for this squad, whether he's starting or coming off the bench, this is what the identity is going to be behind. I don't think that the moves were desperate. I believe it would have been more desperate, even though I was kind of for it, if they would have went and made a move for Levine before the leg injury. If they would have gone out there and kind of, did what they did with Blake Griffin, as Rob Beard called it, Blake Griffin 2.0. That's where I believe they get desperate. I think that move would have helped them, but I also believe it would have capped their ceiling. Right now, you're putting this thing in, and I think it's the right thing to do. You're putting this on the shoulders of your young guys. A large part of this 5-7 stretch over the last 12 games for the Pistons, because it's not just the last 2 games, their last 5 wins, you go back and you look at who's leading this team, and you start to see their identity. It's their belief and their faith and their trust in the process of the young players that they believed initially would lead this team back. Troy Weaver said it in the beginning. I think it was after the draft of Jalen Duren and Jaden Ivey. He stated that these are our guys. These are the players that we want to be able to fit around them. And 7 days before free agency last year, after Asar and Marcus Sasser, he did state again, we want to move forward with our young core, but we want to be able to take a year to assess this team underneath new coach Monty Williams and his system. Clearly, after that assessment, they came away with feeling that this young core was better suited to be able to lead the charge more so than even needing that heavy kind of veteran presence on the team. And so I don't necessarily see it as desperate. I believe that they managed their cap space well. They created some opportunities.
They've been doing that.
Yeah, they've been doing that, yeah. But I tell people this all the time. You can either do things linearly and just pick your one draft pick every single year and then go out there and try as a Detroit team to lure in a free agent, or you can go out there over 3 years, 3 to 4 seasons, and get in more solid draft picks than any other GM in the last, 15, 20, 30 years in Detroit Pistons history. You look back at the previous drafts, I believe that the draft picks that Troy Weaver has bought in, they probably land somewhere in the top 10 easily. Top 10 easily. You think about some of these draft picks, Stanley Johnson, Sekou Doumbouya. The better ones you're going to come away with are going to be Tayshaun Prince and Andre Drummond. Those are the ones that can rival and compare to what Troy Weaver has done in a shorter span, being able to kind of acquire a lot of talent. And that's the thing. These guys still have to develop. They still got to get better. And I believe that we're starting to see them kind of hit their stride a little bit. That 5-7 stretch, I don't believe that that's fool's gold. It was on them. They carried the burden.